It was supposed to be the perfect start to our life together. Emma and I had just tied the knot, and our honeymoon at a beautiful beach resort was meant to be a celebration of everything we'd worked for. We had spent months planning, dreaming of this moment, the sun, the sand, the peaceful luxury of it all. The first day was everything I had imagined. We spent hours lounging on the beach, laughing, talking, sharing our hopes for the future. It felt like the beginning of something beautiful. But by the second day, something felt off. At first, it was small, almost imperceptible. Emma started taking frequent trips back to our room, each time claiming she needed the bathroom or more drinks. It seemed harmless at first, just a little odd. I brushed it off, thinking I was overthinking things. After all, we were in paradise, and it was easy to let little things slide. But as the days went on, that feeling of unease began to grow. By the third day, I noticed she was going to the room more often, and the reasons she gave felt weaker, more like excuses. My mind started to race, and I couldn't ignore the questions anymore. Why was she making these trips? Was there something going on that she wasn't telling me? I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid, that I was overthinking the situation. But deep down, something didn't feel right. By the fourth day, I decided I couldn't ignore it any longer. When she told me she was heading back to the room again, I told myself that I would stay on the beach, like always. But this time, I wouldn't just stay there. I would follow her. I didn't know what I was expecting to find, but I needed to know. Was I wrong? Or was there something I had been missing all along? My heart pounded as I made the decision to follow her, not knowing that in doing so, I was about to uncover a truth that would change everything. I pretended to relax on the beach, watching her as she walked away. As soon as she was out of sight, I slipped off the lounge chair and began to follow her, keeping my distance. My heart was racing, and I could feel the pit in my stomach growing. What was I doing? Was this really necessary? But I couldn't stop myself. I had to know. I moved quietly, making sure she didn't notice me trailing behind her. My eyes fixed on her every move. Near the pool, I saw her. She waved at someone. It was a man I hadn't seen before, someone who had been hanging around the beach, a tall, muscular guy with a deep tan. He waved back, got up from his chair, and walked over to her. The way they greeted each other wasn't just casual. There was something too familiar about it. My heart skipped a beat. They talked for a moment, and then, to my shock, they walked off together. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself to keep moving, following them from a distance. I wasn't sure what I hoped to find, but at that moment, it didn't matter. I had to keep going. They entered the resort's elevator, and my heart dropped. I knew then that I wasn't just seeing things. They were heading to a room, not our room. The man I had seen with her on the beach, the one who looked like he belonged in a fitness magazine, was now taking my wife to another room. I couldn't believe it. My mind was reeling. How could she do this to me? How long had it been going on? I stood there, frozen for a moment, my mind scrambling to make sense of what I had just witnessed. Every part of me wanted to run to her and demand an explanation, but I knew that would only make things worse. Instead, I stayed in the shadows, watching, my body filled with a sick, burning anger that I couldn't shake. I needed answers, but I didn't want to cause a scene. I knew that whatever I did next would change everything. But the decision was already made for me. As soon as they disappeared behind the closed door of that room, I knew I couldn't just stand there and let it go. I felt my emotions spiral into something ugly: betrayal, humiliation, rage, confusion. I had to act, but I didn't know how. I could feel the fury building inside me. I needed to get away from it, from them. I turned and walked back to our room, my mind racing with a plan that I wasn't entirely sure I could follow through on, but I knew I had to try. I couldn't face her, not now. I couldn't be around her without feeling this crushing weight in my chest. I grabbed our luggage, stuffing everything into our bags as quickly as I could. I wasn't going to give her the chance to make things right, not after what I had just seen. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to move. This wasn't just about her. It was about me, about taking control of the situation. I grabbed both room keys, my pulse pounding in my ears. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. Before I left, I made one final decision. I left her with nothing but the swimsuit she had been wearing when she entered the stranger's room. I left her ID at the front desk. She would have to figure out how to get home without any of her belongings. It was harsh, but in that moment, I didn't care. It was the only thing that gave me a sense of control over the situation. I couldn't let her have the upper hand anymore. I walked out of the room, my body trembling with anger and confusion, and I made my way to the parking lot. The drive home felt like it took forever. Every mile seemed to stretch on for an eternity, the 5.5 hours feeling like days. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but one thing was clear: I couldn't go back to her. I couldn't face her, not after what she had done. And yet, there was a part of me that kept asking the same question: was this revenge? Or was it just the only way to get out of this nightmare? As I drove, I didn't have the answers. But I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't stay in that life. I couldn't stay with her. And no matter what happened after, I had to move on. A few days later, I had already moved out of the apartment. I didn't leave a note, and I didn't say goodbye. I couldn't face her. I couldn't face the woman who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I thought about all the moments we'd shared, the good times, the plans for the future, and now, they all felt like lies. I didn't care about her explanation. I didn't want to hear it. I couldn't be around her anymore. Then came the call. It was from Emma's mother. I answered, not sure what to expect, but I could already feel the tension in my chest. She didn't waste any time. Her voice was filled with anger as she raked me over the coals, blaming me for everything. She went on about Emma's panic when she realized I was gone, the desperation in her voice as she tried to get back into our room, only to find herself locked out with no money, no phone, and no way to reach me. She went on and on, recounting every painful detail of Emma's experience. She told me how Emma had begged the hotel staff for help, only to find out that I had taken everything. Her cell phone, her ID, her clothes, everything gone. Emma was stranded, confused, and scared. She had to call her parents to get help. They sent her money for clothes and a rental car, but that wasn't the end of it. The car she rented had a faulty gas gauge, and she got stuck on the side of the road. She had to wait for roadside assistance for hours. I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. She had made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences. I didn't care about her suffering. At that moment, I didn't even care about the pain I had caused. The truth was, I was angry that she had done this to me, angry that I had been so blind. Emma had shattered the trust one had placed in her, and no apology could fix that. I didn't want to hear it from her mother, either. There was nothing she could say to change what had happened. The more her mother talked, the more I felt my resolve harden. I had no intention of going back to Emma. I didn't owe her anything anymore. I had already cut all ties. The calls and messages from her, both from her and her family, kept coming, but I ignored every single one. I didn't respond. I blocked her number. I deleted her contact from my phone. On social media, I unfriended her, blocked her, and made sure there was no way for her to reach me. There was no way back. In the days that followed, her friends and family continued to bombard me with messages. Some blamed me, others sympathized with me. But it didn't matter. I had made my decision. Emma had broken something in me that couldn't be fixed. The betrayal had torn apart whatever we had built together. Then, weeks later, a letter arrived from her. I could feel the weight of it in my hands, the paper almost trembling. Inside, I found her apologies. She explained everything, trying to justify her actions. She told me how sorry she was, how much she regretted it all. She said she had made a huge mistake and that she still loved me. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The words on that page didn't change the fact that she had been with another man, that she had lied to me, that she had destroyed everything we had. I still couldn't understand how she could do it. I never spoke to Emma again. The letter was the last thing I would hear from her, and I made sure of that. The phone calls stopped after a while, and so did the messages. I moved on, but the scars of what happened would stay with me. It wasn't easy, but I was learning to live without her. There was no going back. The pain was there, but it wasn't consuming me anymore. Slowly, I began to heal. Time helped, but it wasn't just time. It was the realization that I deserved better. As the months passed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I spent time with friends, with family, and with myself. The pain didn't fade overnight, but eventually, I started to see things more clearly. I wasn't the same person I had been when Emma and I first met. I had learned, painfully, that love isn't always enough. Trust, respect, and loyalty are just as important. Then one day, I met someone new. Her name was Sarah. She was kind, patient, and understanding. She didn't rush anything. We built a connection slowly, but the more I got to know her, the more I realized that this was different. She didn't just fill a void, She made me feel whole again. She respected me, and more importantly, she earned my trust. We were building something real, and it felt good. I remember one evening, sitting together, laughing over dinner. I looked at her and felt a sense of peace. I realized that the darkness from the past was finally starting to fade. The scars from Emma's betrayal weren't gone, but they didn't define me anymore. I had learned to love again, to trust again, and to believe in the possibility of something better. Eventually, I proposed. The day I asked Sarah to be my wife felt like a victory, not just over the past, but over all the pain and heartbreak I had endured. We got married in a small ceremony, surrounded by the people who truly cared about us. As we exchanged vows, I knew that I had found something real, something that wasn't tainted by lies or betrayal. This was a love that was built on trust, and that made all the difference. The story with Emma was over, and it wasn't a story of redemption or reconciliation. It was a chapter that had ended, and it had taken time for me to close it. But now, with Sarah, I was writing a new chapter, one where love wasn't just a promise, but a reality. The past no longer had a hold on me, and I was finally ready to move forward. Looking back, I can say with certainty that what I went through with Emma was one of the hardest things I've ever faced. But it taught me something important. Even after the worst betrayal, there is hope. The pain will fade. You can find love again. And with that love, you can rebuild your life. So, if you're dealing with heartbreak, remember this: the future is still waiting for you. It might take time, but the right person will come along. And when they do, you'll realize that the pain of the past doesn't have to define you. If you made it this far, I'd appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button. It means a lot, and it helps me keep sharing these stories with you. Thank you.